ご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
Today's episode of Gundam Development History is brought to you by Loot Crate and their Crunchyroll Crate. Use the code KAKAROT15 to get 15% off of your next purchase and support the channel. Links down below. According to Zeonzim Daikun, new types were the next step in human evolution, and that freed from Earth's gravity, they would develop a sixth sense that would allow them to understand each other without misunderstanding. However, with the Zombies taking over Zeon and preparing the nation for all-out war with the Federation, it was discovered that this sixth sense had the potential to be weaponized. Due to the Minovsky particle, traditional means of wireless communication could easily be jammed, but Zeon researchers began speculating that those special brainwaves that new types possess to communicate with each other could also be used to communicate and therefore control wireless weapons. Not only would these remote weapons not be jammed by the Minovsky particles, but since they were directly controlled by the brainwaves, they would be far more responsive than any traditional weapon. To find and research these new types then, the Flanagan Institute was established by Cecilia Zabi. But of course this was not for the good of mankind. This was to research new types for their military uses. As a result, the Institute would also develop several mobile weapons for their test subjects to operate in battle. Their first success was the Braw Bro. This massive mobile armor had 4 wire-guided weapon pods that could be controlled through the so-called Psycommu system, short for Psychic Communicator. As the name indicates, this was the breakthrough system that allowed a single new type pilot to mentally control the weapon pods and fly the Braw Bro at the same time. However, despite this, the machine was still completely operable by regular pilots for either test purposes or for during real combat. For this, the Braw Bro not just had room for a pilot, but also for 2 extra gunners. And even though this was a functional configuration, it still wasn't as good as having a single new type controlling everything. The Braw Bro was also designed to be split into individual parts, each with their own propulsion system, granting the machine 2 big benefits. First of all, it gave the test data and the pilot a greater chance of returning back to base. And secondly, it also allowed the Braw Bro to keep on fighting if one of the parts got damaged. The main cockpit itself was connected to the 2 weapon pods with dual megaparticle guns and was said to be, by itself, the equivalent of 2 to 4 mobile suits. So as long as this part remained unscathed, the Braw Bro remained a serious threat for whatever enemy it was facing. There was also a very good reason for the size of the Braw Bro. The Psycommu system was a massive system, and combined with the weapon systems and the propulsion system, the Braw Bro just had to be that big to house everything. The next step then was to miniaturize this system and attempt to mount it onto a mobile suit. This became known as the Bishop Plan, the quest to create the MS-16X. The first step was the YMS-06Z Psycommu early test type Zaku. Not a lot is known about this unit, and from a functional point of view, it was closer to the Braw Bro than the later Psycommu Zakus. Rather than having the wire-guided arms that the Zeong would become famous for, it had weapon pods that were very similar to those of the Braw Bro. This machine was then further developed into the MS-06Z Psycommu system Zaku, sometimes also referred to as the MS-06Z Bishop due to the Bishop Plan, or the quote-unquote Zeong test base. And originally the machine was going to be called the MS-16X Zeong, named as such because the engineers envisioned it as the culmination of all of Zeon's technology into one perfect machine. However, the Psycommu Zaku still had a way to go before reaching perfection. But regardless, it would carry the MS-16X designation for a while before having it changed to MS-06Z. Its main goal then was to test out the new arms that the Bishop Plan called for. Rather than having separate pods or bits with megaparticle guns in them, the hands now became the weapons with each finger serving as its own megaparticle gun. However, combined with the high-performance thrusters and the new head that also incorporated various Gelgoog parts, this machine was not only extremely expensive to produce, but also had a very limited operating time of around 10 minutes. This meant that production was halted after the first 3 test units, although it is rumored that a 4th unit was cobbled together from the spare parts. In addition, the looks were also a source of ridicule, as comparisons were drawn to mountain gorillas due to the oversized arms. But despite this, the machine did achieve what it was meant to achieve. It might not have looked the best or even be suitable for combat, but the wire-guided arm tests were a success. And thanks to these tests, Zeon could start developing tactics for using them in actual combat. All 3 confirmed units would eventually see action during the Battle of Abawa Q, although Unit 2 would do so as a slightly different unit. This machine was modified to what would eventually become known as the MSN-01 Psycommu Test High Mobility Type Zaku. Other than the previously mentioned issues, another flaw that Zeon engineers wanted to fix was the lack of speed. And to do this, they looked back at the Braw Bro and decided that the best way to go was to replace the legs with high-yield rocket boosters. To make it look even more funky then, it also got a quite unique landing gear. While this definitely made the MSN-01 a very capable hit-and-run machine, it still suffered from all of the other issues. It was expensive and only had a limited operating time. But, as I said before, despite all of these flaws, the unit would still participate in the Battle of Abawa Q, and a second unit is even rumored to have existed. In terms of naming then, it seems that this machine was still designated as the MS-16X when the regular test type's designation had already been changed to MS-06Z. It would only become the MSN-01 after it was decided that with the introduction of the Zeong that we all know today, the designation of these new type machines would become MSN. The Zeong became MSN-02, and the high mobility type retroactively became the MSN-01. To fix the flaws then of the previous Bishop Plan machines, the Zeong was built as a completely new unit. It was to become a massive 30.1 meter mobile suit that was worthy of bearing Zeon's name. Legend has it that it was so big because it was designed as a counter to a supposed giant Federation Gundam, which was actually a customized ball that just looked like a giant Gundam head, and the Zeon soldiers that spotted it mistakenly assumed that it had an equally giant body to match. This then supposedly made its way back to the Zeon engineers, who then somehow managed to design and build the Zeong in less than a week. In reality though, the Zeong's massive size wasn't so much a choice as it was a necessity. To circumvent the limited operational time of the test Zakus, it was decided that with current technology, their only option was to use a significantly bigger reactor, 3.8 times the size of the one used by the Zaku, which would then also require a much bigger mobile suit. This also allowed the Zeong to have more weapons without impacting its operating time too much. In addition to the wire-guided arms, which had a megaparticle gun in each finger, it also featured 2 extra megaparticle guns on the waist and 1 in the head, stylized as a mouth. What was a very unique feature for a mobile suit of the time was that the cockpit was located in the head as opposed to in the torso. And thanks to this feature, thrusters were also mounted on the head so that it could serve as an escape craft for the pilot, or should he or she want to, it also allowed him or her to continue fighting thanks to the megaparticle gun. In the final stages of the war, 3 Zeong units were produced, with 1 unit used by ace pilot Char Aznavour at the Battle of Abawa Q. This unit famously lacked legs due to time constraints, and instead had extra thrusters mounted on it to compensate. Even though it was supposedly only 80% complete, this wouldn't impact its performance at all because this was a space battle.
80%? 冗談じゃありません。現状でジオングの性能は 100% 出せます。足はついてない。あんなの飾りです。偉い人にはそれがわからんのです。
Ironically enough, this incomplete Zeong is nowadays typically referred to as just the Zeong, and the completed Zeong, which is what the Zeong was supposed to be, is now referred to as the perfect Zeong. What the other 2 Zeongs did is currently unknown, but officially all 3 Zeongs were destroyed by battle before the war ended. The original design for the Zeong also required it to be able to split into 7 parts, head, chest, waist, arms, and legs to perform an even more devastating all-range attack. Sadly, this idea had to be shelved because it was simply too much for the technology they had available at the time. This concept was then brought back for the Zeong's successor unit, the MSN-03, which was also just going to be called the Zeong. This machine would be very similar to the original Zeong, but would feature the aforementioned ability to split into 7 parts, and would also be capable of doing it wirelessly. Unfortunately, no other substantial details are known because the war ended before any serious amount of time could be dedicated to it. As such, the existence of a supposed variant, the MSN-03 Great Zeong, seems to be questionable at best, even as just a concept. But it does offer us a very interesting insight into what the weapons of the MSN-03 could have been, as it gives all 7 parts weapons. Something that would not be the case if the MSN-03 was simply a wireless MSN-02. The arms and head remain functionally the same, each leg has a megaparticle gun and heat claws, the waist has 4 small megaparticle guns and 1 big one, and the body has a scattering megaparticle gun in addition to anti-ship missiles in the shoulders. Another machine that is rumored to have existed is the MSN-01 Kikeroga, a machine that resembles a cross between the Psycommu Zaku and the Zeong, with 2 extra megaparticle guns on the shoulders, and according to one picture, legs that resemble those of the later Garibaldi Beta. Supposedly, it was developed alongside the Psycommu Zakus, but taking a different path to get to the Zeong. As opposed to being a development from the Braw Bro, this machine was meant as a mobile suit-sized version of the Elmeth. But all of this has yet to be confirmed, along with whether or not this machine even existed in the first place. After the war then, the Zeong itself wouldn't see any further development, but it would receive 2 spiritual successors. The first one was the DENZ-999 Neo Zeong. Just like the original Zeong was the best thing that Zeon had to offer, the Neo Zeong was the best thing that Neo Zeong had to offer. Its general shape was also very reminiscent of the Zeong, and it even had similar arms. In addition to this, it also had 6 megaparticle cannons on the shoulders, eye field generators, a new weapon called the Psycho Shard Generator, and so much more. Just like the Zeong, this thing was a force to be reckoned with. From its spare parts, a second unit, appropriately named the second Neo Zeong, was constructed. Other than a different color scheme, the shoulders were overhauled and the arms were now wire-guided, making it even more like the original Zeong. The second successor then was the ZMGE-03 Zong, used by the Zanskar Empire. And from afar, this machine could probably be mistaken for the Zeong if it was painted in the same colors. It even featured the separation gimmick that the Zeong was meant to have. And then finally we have the MSN-02R Zeong High Mobility type. This is essentially a what-if version of the Zeong from the Giran's Greed video game series, and shows us what could have happened if Zeon engineers took lessons from Char's performance. He essentially showed them that the legs were just for decoration, and that they could achieve much more with more thrusters. But since the 1-year war stopped after the Battle of Baoku, this machine was never meant to be. And that was all for the Zeong's surprisingly long development history. It might not have been on screen for long, but it sure had an impact. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more similar content in the future. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.